Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a soft little corner of the night where questions become gentle companions and curiosity settles beside you like a quiet friend. If you're settling into bed, wrapping yourself in a blanket, or simply looking for a moment of stillness after a long day, I'm glad you're here. Tonight we're going to wander into one of the oldest and most intimate mysteries the human mind has ever held. The idea that reality itself might be a kind of dream. Not the frantic kind filled with odd adventures and mismatched scenes, but the deeper question underneath, whether the world you're touching, seeing and remembering is as solid as it feels, or if it's something your mind is helping to craft every moment you're awake. But before we begin this slow drift into questions without rush or worry, I'd love to ask you a small favour. If you enjoy these quiet explorations, where science and gentle wonder meet in the stillness of night, consider giving this video a like or subscribing to join this calm little community. And if you feel awake enough, you can even leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I always find it strangely comforting to imagine people scattered across time zones, from midnight to morning, each listening from their own quiet corner of the world. Now, if you haven't already, feel free to dim the lights, soften your breath, and allow your body to sink just a little deeper into wherever you're resting. Think of this not as a lecture, but as a shared night walk through a landscape of ideas, slow, unhurried, gently unfolding. There's no need to focus too hard. If your thoughts drift, that's perfectly fine. Let them wander. We'll still be here, moving slowly through the question together. Because tonight, we're stepping into a space between waking and dreaming, a place where reality feels steady, but the edges soften just enough to ask, what holds it together? And with that, let's begin. Imagine for a moment that you're just waking from a dream. Not a wild one filled with impossible landscapes, but a soft, ordinary dream. The kind where you're walking through a familiar room, speaking to familiar faces, hearing sounds that feel as real as any you hear while you're awake. And then you open your eyes. For a second, there's that quiet hesitation, a tiny pause, a gentle uncertainty where you wonder, was that real? That moment fades quickly, replaced by the solid feeling of the bed beneath you, the walls around you, the morning light peeking in. But the question lingers, in a very small way. How did your mind create a world that felt so real a moment ago, only for it to vanish like mist? That tiny hesitation, so brief that most people barely notice it, is where our journey truly begins. Because that moment suggests something profound. The line between dreaming and waking might not be as thick as we think. You and I live in a world that feels stable, grounded, predictable. We trust it because it repeats itself. Dawn follows night. Doors stay where they are. Coffee tastes like coffee. This consistency becomes our anchor, the compass we use to tell waking life from the worlds we wander through when we sleep. But if the mind can create a convincing world at night without your permission, how much of the world you experience during the day is also shaped by that same quiet artist inside your head? This isn't a new question. For thousands of years, people across civilizations have paused in the same soft uncertainty. Ancient philosophers wrote about the possibility that life might be a kind of dream. Mystics describe the world as a thin veil stretched over a deeper truth. Even today, that cultural curiosity appears in stories, films, and late-night conversations that begin with, "Have you ever wondered?" But instead of rushing toward any conclusion, let's rest gently inside the question. What does it mean for something to feel real? Reality is not something you directly touch. You experience a version of it, filtered, interpreted, shaped, through senses that your brain translates into colour, sound, shape, and meaning. And if you've ever woken from a dream convinced it really happened, even for just one breath, then you've felt how convincing the mind can be. A dream has no physical sunlight, yet it can feel warm. It has no real flaw, yet you walk across it as naturally as you do in waking life. The mind builds these experiences from memory, emotion, and imagination, stitching them together into something that feels familiar. You might wonder why dreams can create such vivid impressions. Inside the brain, regions responsible for emotion and imagery remain active during sleep, while the parts that question, evaluate, and organize experience rest quietly. This creates a world where feelings become landscapes and thoughts become scenes. But here is the gentle twist. When you're awake, the brain is also stitching together a picture of the world, not from imagination, but from the soft dance between expectation and sensation. The waking world, too, is partly constructed. You see not just with your eyes, but with your mind, which fills gaps, smooths details, and quiets contradictions, so your experience of the world feels continuous. From there, the waking dream paradox emerges. If dreams can borrow their realism from waking life, and waking life borrows its coherence from the mind's inner predictions, then perhaps the difference between the two is not one of nature, but of stability. Waking reality holds together longer. It repeats itself. It follows rules that allow you to predict the next moment. But the raw essence of experience, the way you feel the world, comes from the same source in both states, your conscious mind interpreting something beyond itself. So tonight, instead of treating that brief confusion after waking as a simple quirk, let's treat it as an invitation to explore the idea that reality, as firm as it feels, might share more with dreams than we normally admit. Not in a frightening way, but in a deeply curious, quietly beautiful one. Because if the boundary between waking and dreaming is softer than we thought, then the world may be far more mysterious, far more intricate, and far more wondrous than it appears at first glance. And as we drift deeper into this idea, we'll begin to see how philosophers, scientists, and storytellers across history have tried to understand that soft, shimmering edge between what is and what seems to be. There is something quietly reassuring about waking life. Even if your mornings are sometimes rushed or your days feel unpredictable, there's a familiar rhythm that wraps around everything you do. You open your eyes, and the same ceiling looks back. The bed beneath you presses upward with a gentle firmness. The room holds its shape. Objects sit where you left them. And in those first moments, even before thoughts fully gather, there's a deep sense that the world is solid and unchanged. This sense of steadiness becomes the anchor from which everything else begins. What makes this feeling so powerful isn't just the physical touch of the world, it's the consistency. When you walk to the kitchen, the floor greets your feet exactly as it did the day before. The light entering the room behaves as expected, painting soft patterns on familiar surfaces. Even small details, like the smell of your morning drink or the creak of a door you've opened 1,000 times, come back with the same gentle reliability. These repetitions form the foundation on which your mind builds certainty. In this way, reality feels not just present, but trustworthy. It's no coincidence that humans find comfort in this predictability. Our minds are shaped to seek patterns. We feel safer when things follow a rhythm, even a subtle one. Consider how disorienting it feels when something breaks that rhythm. A misplaced object, an unexpected noise, a shadow that doesn't immediately make sense. For a brief moment, reality seems to ripple, but then the mind rushes to explain it, to restore the frame, to return everything to a familiar shape. It's this constant stitching together of the world that gives waking life its seamless texture. But beneath that seamlessness lies a curious truth. The world you move through each day may be steady, but the experience of it is still filtered through your senses, each one gathering fragments of information. Your eyes take in light, your ears pick up vibrations, your skin notices pressure and temperature. These signals are like soft whispers passed inward. The mind doesn't simply receive them, It interprets them, organises them, assigns meaning to them, and it does so quickly, almost gracefully, smoothing out rough edges so the world feels continuous. Imagine for a moment walking through a dim hallway. You might see a shape out of the corner of your eye, a coat hanging on a rack, a chair, a shadow on the wall. For a heartbeat, your mind fills in what it expects to see. Only when you turn toward it does the actual object come into focus. This simple experience illustrates something subtle. Your mind is constantly guessing, predicting, and adjusting. It relies on memory and familiarity to fill gaps before you consciously notice what's there. Most of the time, this works so well that you never realize it's happening. The world feels real because your mind makes it feel that way. This doesn't mean reality is an illusion. It simply means that your perception of it is shaped by layers of interpretation. The brain, after all, is trying to give you the most useful and stable experience it can. It blends what you expect with what you sense, creating a world that feels coherent. It's like listening to an orchestra. You hear the music as one flowing composition, not as individual instruments tuning themselves. The mind performs a similar orchestra of perception, weaving together countless small signals into one smooth world. Memory plays a gentle role in this too. You remember where the table is in your home even before you look at it. You recall the general layout of your street, your workplace, your favourite cafe. These memories guide your expectations, which guide your perception. When something matches your memory, it feels real. When it doesn't, you pause. Your mind checks the pattern. It tries to align what you're seeing with what you believe should be there. This constant dialogue between memory and perception is part of why reality feels stable. And then there is the influence of those around us, the shared agreement of reality. If you see a tree, and someone beside you sees the same tree and both of you describe it similarly, a kind of quiet confirmation settles in. The world feels more real because others seem to experience it too. Shared experience creates a gentle, reinforcing loop. In this way, reality becomes not just what you perceive alone, but what you perceive together. If dreams are private, waking life feels real, partly because it is communal. This raises an interesting question. Is reality real because it is inherently stable, or because our minds and our communities make it feel that way? For most of human history, people answered this question with stories, rituals, and philosophies. Some believed the world was a divine creation. Others thought reality was a test, a cycle, a temporary stage, or a reflection of something deeper. These beliefs gave structure to the world, much like our modern expectations and memories do. But whatever explanation people chose, the purpose was similar: to make sense of the world's steadiness. When you wake up each morning and the world feels the same as the one you fell asleep in, the mind relaxes. Certainty feels close at hand. Real feels real. And yet that small hesitation after dreaming remains. That soft question that arises before the morning light fully arrives. It doesn't linger long, but it's enough to remind us that our trust in waking reality is built on how smoothly the world presents itself, not on any absolute proof. As we continue this quiet exploration, we'll begin to see how this trust interacts with deeper layers of thought, layers shaped by ancient philosophers, modern scientists, and the mysteries of our own minds. The steadiness of the world might be comforting, but it is not the end of the story. It is simply the beginning of our curiosity. Imagine sitting in a quiet room with dim light drifting gently across the walls. The shapes around you are familiar, perhaps a chair, a table, the soft outline of a doorway, but for a moment your eyes play a small trick. A coat hanging in the corner looks like a person. A shadow looks like a movement. Then, just as quickly, the scene settles into clarity again. Your mind corrects itself, and the world becomes steady once more. This small, everyday moment carries a distant echo of one of the oldest stories humans have told about reality, the story of Plato's cave. It's a tale whispered across thousands of years, yet soft enough to hold in the palm of your mind. And as we explore it tonight, let it unfold gently, like a dream remembered slowly. Long ago, Plato invited his students to imagine a group of people who had lived their entire lives inside a cave. They were unable to turn their heads, chained in place, facing a blank wall. Behind them burned a fire. Between the fire and the captives stood a walkway where people carried objects, tools, baskets, figures carved from wood or stone. The shapes of these objects cast shadows on the wall, dancing in flickers of firelight. And because the prisoners knew nothing else, the shadows became their world. A shifting play of silhouettes was their only reality. For them, a shadow wasn't just a reflection, it was the thing itself. A shadow of a cup was a cup. A shadow of a bird was a bird. They didn't know the objects behind them existed. They didn't know the fire existed. Everything they understood came from the wall in front of them. Plato meant for this to be unsettling, but also strangely beautiful. It reminds us that what feels solid may only be a surface, and what we call reality might be an interpretation, one version of something larger, filtered through our senses. When you think about it this way, the boundary between waking life and dream life begins to soften. Imagine now that one prisoner is released. Slowly they turn their head for the first time. The bright fire stings their eyes. The shapes they see are strange compared to their familiar shadows. They might not believe the objects behind them are real. Their mind, shaped by a lifetime of silhouettes, would cling to the world they understood. Even stepping outside the cave into daylight would overwhelm them. The world outside would feel too bright, too vivid, too uncertain. It would take time to trust that this new reality was real, or real in a different way. This gentle resistance mirrors the hesitation we feel when something challenges our sense of reality. We instinctively trust the world we already know because it feels safe, even if the mind is capable of seeing more or experiencing differently. It holds on to familiar patterns. This is why waking life feels so convincingly real. We've lived in it long enough to trust it. But Plato's story doesn't end inside the cave. The philosopher imagined the freed prisoner stepping into the sunlight, struggling at first, then slowly recognizing shapes, colors, reflections, movement. The world outside the cave would reveal itself not all at once, but gradually, like dawn forming on the horizon, and once they adjust, the prisoner might feel a gentle sorrow for those still inside, unaware of a world that stretches beyond the shadows. What makes this story resonate across centuries is not just its philosophical depth, it is the way it mirrors our human experience. Each of us, in some way, lives inside a cave of our senses, our memories, our interpretations. We see the world not as it is, but as our minds translate it. And just like the shadows on the wall, our perceptions can sometimes appear complete, even when they are only glimpses. Think of how often we accept first impressions, a glance at a stranger, a quick reading of a situation, a memory that feels certain but shifts slightly when retold. These moments reveal how easily the mind constructs reality from limited information. It chooses the simplest explanation first, then builds on it, often without question. The world feels coherent because our minds make it coherent. But Plato's cave also invites a gentler possibility, that reality might hold more than we currently perceive, not necessarily in a dramatic or mysterious way, but in the everyday sense that there may always be deeper layers hidden beneath the familiar. The world is rich with subtleties we miss, patterns we overlook, and meanings we haven't yet discovered. Even in modern times, we can see this with something as simple as new knowledge. Before understanding electricity, firelight was reality. Before discovering microbes, illness seemed like a curse. Before recognizing the vastness of space, The stars felt close enough to touch. Each new understanding is like stepping a little further out of the cave, letting more light in. There's also a quiet emotional truth beneath the cave story. Sometimes we grow attached to the shadows we know. Change feels uncomfortable. New ideas can appear too bright, too sharp, too unfamiliar. Our minds protect us by holding on to what feels steady. Even when the world offers more, we reach for the silhouettes we trust. Yet the idea that reality could be deeper than it seems is not meant to unsettle us. In Plato's telling, the sunlight isn't harsh, it's illuminating. The world outside the cave is not dangerous, it's expansive. What we learn from this story is not that life is an illusion, but that our understanding of it is always in motion, always growing, always capable of seeing a little further beyond the wall. And so, as we drift from ancient philosophy back into the present moment, the cave becomes a gentle reminder that what we take as real may be only the first layer of a much wider landscape. A landscape we will continue exploring, softly and slowly as this night unfolds. As we step gently out of the shadows of Plato's cave, the question of what is truly real continues to follow us, soft as a breeze moving through the mind. The ancient world was not the only place where people wondered whether the world we touch and trust might be more mysterious than it appears. Centuries later, a French philosopher named René Descartes found himself sitting beside a fireplace on a quiet winter night, asking a question that still echoes through time. How do I know that anything around me is real? In the stillness of that evening, with snow gathering outside and the warm glow of the fire flickering against his walls, he realized something unsettling yet strangely familiar. Dreams often feel real while they are happening, so real that only waking breaks their spell. Descartes began by considering the obvious. When he was dreaming, he could feel the heat of a fire, taste food, walk through streets, hear voices. Everything in the dream behaved with the same clarity and detail as waking life, and yet none of it existed. Not the paths he travelled, not the people he spoke with, not the warmth on his skin. If dreams could mimic reality so perfectly, he wondered, then what assurance did he have that the waking world wasn't another kind of dream, one simply longer and more stable? He wasn't suggesting that the world was definitely false. Instead, he was gently pulling at the thread of certainty, noticing how easily the mind accepts what it senses. This line of thought led him to his famous meditation. If all our sensory experiences can deceive us, even while we sleep, then perhaps we should treat them with caution rather than absolute trust. In dreams, we respond as though everything is true, even though none of it exists. And so he asked, almost like a whisper into the night, what if all of this fire, these walls, this world, could be another dream? To bring the idea closer to our modern imagination, Descartes pictured a universe where some unknown force, what he called a powerful deceiver, could generate experiences so convincing that we would never know the difference. Today, instead of thinking about demons or deceivers, we might imagine sophisticated simulations, immersive illusions, or complex systems that shape reality from behind the scenes. But Descartes' concern was never about the deceiver itself. It was about the fragility of perception, about how easily the mind believes the world it sees. But the Western philosophical tradition was not the only one to explore this question. Across the world, in the rich landscapes of Hindu thought, reality has long been described as Maya, a word that means illusion. Not illusion in the sense of something fake, but illusion in the sense of something transient, shifting, woven from layers we cannot always perceive. Maya is the veil that shapes appearance. It is not meant to trick us cruelly, but to show that the world we touch is only one aspect of a deeper truth. In this view, life is like a play or a grand story where everything feels real to the characters on stage. They laugh, cry, hope, and fear. But behind the curtain, something larger is unfolding, something timeless, spacious and unbound by the shifting scenes. The curtain is not meant to hide the truth forever, only to let us live the story for a while. And when the story ends, the curtain gently lifts. Buddhism offers a slightly different but equally quiet reflection. Instead of focusing on illusion as something separate from reality, it invites us to notice how everything changes. Thoughts arise and fade. Feelings appear like ripples and soften again. Even the self, our sense of me, is not a fixed object but a flowing process. If everything shifts, then holding on to anything as absolutely solid becomes difficult. The world is neither unreal nor fully real. It is simply in motion, always becoming. When viewed together, Descartes' doubt and these Eastern perspectives form a gentle tapestry. Not one of fear or confusion, but of curiosity. They show us that people across the world, across time, have looked at the world and felt the same soft uncertainty, that perhaps the reality we trust is only one layer of a much larger landscape. They encourage us to notice the quiet gaps in perception, the moments when the world feels slightly dreamlike, slightly suspended, slightly unfamiliar. And this brings us to an important emotional question. If reality is possibly an illusion, or partially constructed, or layered in ways we cannot fully see, does that make life less meaningful? For many philosophers and spiritual teachers, the answer has always been no. In fact, they often suggest the opposite. They propose that understanding the uncertain nature of reality makes each moment more precious, not less. If everything is fleeting or dreamlike, then each breath becomes a miracle, each connection a small piece of wonder. Rather than diminishing the world, the idea of illusion deepens our appreciation of it. Even in our own lives, we sometimes feel this. Think of the moments that feel unreal in a beautiful way. The birth of a child standing under a night sky full of stars, hearing a piece of music that seems to open something inside you. These moments feel dreamlike, not because they are false, but because they are emotionally vast. They stretch beyond ordinary perception. Reality, at its most meaningful, often feels like something more than a simple physical world, something shimmering, something fragile yet profound. So as we move forward, let's carry these ideas not as heavy theories, but as gentle possibilities. Descartes' doubt, Maya's veil, and the Buddhist sense of impermanence do not insist that the world is unreal. They simply invite us to loosen our grip on certainty and consider that reality may be softer, deeper, and more layered than we usually notice. And with that softer perspective, we can continue our night's journey into the question of what the world truly is, and how our minds may shape it without us ever realizing. Picture yourself standing in a familiar room, the place where you keep your books, a soft blanket, maybe a favorite lamp. You know this room well. Even before you turn your head, you can already sense where certain objects are. The shelves to your right, the window behind you, the quiet space near the door. You don't need to see them. Your mind has already painted the scene. Only afterward do your eyes move across the room to confirm what was already there in your imagination. It feels natural, effortless. But hidden inside this simple moment is one of the most extraordinary things about the human mind. Your brain doesn't wait for the world to arrive. It predicts it. Constantly, quietly, almost beautifully. Every second, your senses send in small threads of information. Light, sound, touch. They're incomplete, fragile strands. And while these signals drift inward, the brain begins weaving them into a fuller scene, not by waiting, but by guessing. The guesses come from memory, from patterns, from years of experience. The world you see is not simply delivered to you like a picture printed on paper. It's drawn out of suggestions and then gently corrected by what your eyes, ears, and skin confirm. You can think of your brain as a patient artist who sketches before the model fully appears, painting outlines swiftly, then shading in details, adjusting the strokes when something doesn't quite match. Most of the time, the painting is so accurate that you never notice the brushwork. You simply feel that you're seeing reality as it is. Take something as ordinary as mishearing a word. Someone says, "Did you get the mail?" And for a split second, your mind thinks they said meal. The two words share a shape, a rhythm. Your mind leans toward the one it expects. Only after a breath do your ears nudge the brain. No, that wasn't meal. Just a small sound difference, a simple slip. And instantly the picture corrects itself. Or imagine walking home in the evening and seeing a shape at the corner of your eye. Perhaps it looks like someone standing still. Your breath catches for a moment. Then you realise it's simply a tree trunk or a coat on a hanger behind a window. This happens because your mind fills in the unknown with familiar possibilities. It prefers a guess, even if imperfect, to uncertainty. Even the act of seeing is more like a conversation than a simple reflection. Light reaches your eyes. Yes, but your mind is the one deciding what it means. A patch of brightness becomes a window. A curved shape becomes a face. Your brain does not wait for perfect clarity. It works with what it has, finishing the picture from the inside. Some researchers gently describe perception as a waking dream, not in the sense that the world is false, but in the sense that your mind plays an active role in constructing the experience. Your senses provide hints, your brain provides structure, and together they build a reality you feel so intimately. This is not something rare or unusual. It is happening every moment, with every breath. Even right now, your mind is predicting the next word, the next sentence, the next idea before it fully arrives. This predictive ability is what makes the world feel continuous. Without it, reality would stutter. Every small delay in your senses would feel like a flicker in a poorly made video. But instead, your mind smooths all the edges, fills all the gaps, and keeps everything flowing. This quiet process explains small everyday puzzles, like why you sometimes trip on a step you thought was there, or reach for a pocket that isn't yours, or swear someone called your name when they didn't. Each moment reveals how much of life is expectation meeting sensation, and also how much sensation relies on expectation to make sense. Even colours, shapes, and textures are interpretations. What you see as red, someone else might see slightly differently, not because their eyes are wrong, but because their minds interpret the signal in their own subtle way. Yet both of you trust what you see because your brains deliver a stable version of the world. Think for a moment about how we interact with sounds in a conversation. You don't hear every syllable clearly. Background noise, distractions, moments of silence. Your mind fills in the missing pieces so smoothly that you rarely notice. When someone says, "I'll meet you at the cafe," you don't hear, "I'll see you at the cafe." Instead, your mind bridges the gaps instinctively. Reality becomes a coherent story because your brain edits out the noise. This soft weaving of prediction and correction isn't a flaw. It is what allows you to move gracefully through the world. Without it, everyday life would feel slow and confusing, like hearing a song note by note with long pauses in between. The mind gives you the melody before the instruments even play it. And because the brain plays such an active role in shaping the world, the boundaries between perception and imagination begin to blur. Not in a disorienting way, but in a gentle, almost poetic one. When you see something, what you're really experiencing is the collaboration between what is out there and what is within you. It makes you wonder, if the mind constantly paints the world ahead of time, are we ever experiencing reality in its rawest form? Or are we always encountering a version softened, smoothed, and shaped by ourselves? This doesn't diminish reality, it enriches it. It reminds us that our experience of the world is deeply personal, crafted moment by moment, like an ongoing artwork. We don't just witness the world, we participate in it, shaping its meaning through the way we perceive, remember, and understand. When you think of perception in this way, even simple experiences carry a kind of quiet magic. A pattern of light on the floor becomes a conversation between sun and mind. The sound of a passing train becomes a memory blended into the present. The warmth of a cup in your hands becomes not just heat, but a story woven from sensation and expectation. And so, as we continue this night's journey, keep this idea with you. Every step you take through the world is guided by both what the world gives you and what you bring to it. You're not just the observer, you're also the painter. There is a quiet strangeness woven into the way we experience the world, a softness beneath the surface of perception that most of us rarely notice. We trust what we see, hear, and feel because it arrives with such immediacy. A cup on the table looks like a cup. A voice calling your name sounds like a voice. A gentle breeze brushing your arm feels exactly like a breeze. And yet, the mind, so elegant, so capable, can be fooled with surprising ease. Not because it is flawed, but because it is creative, predictive, and always trying to make sense of things, even when the information it receives is incomplete. Take visual illusions, for instance. They often appear in children's books or on cafe walls, simple drawings that trick the eyes into seeing shapes that aren't quite there. Two lines that look different lengths but are actually the same. A flat image that seems to bend or twist or rise toward you. These illusions reveal something important. Your mind doesn't merely record what you see, it interprets, guesses, and fills gaps. The illusion works not because your eyes fail, but because your mind is doing its usual job, making meaning where none exists. Some illusions are even gentler, hiding inside daily life. Imagine walking down a street at dusk. The shadows grow longer, the edges of objects soften. A tree branch becomes the suggestion of a figure. A parked bicycle looks momentarily like an animal crouching. Your mind reaches into memory, pulling out familiar shapes to explain the unfamiliar ones. Only when you get closer does the truth reveal itself. The world snaps into clarity, and you smile at your own mistake. But the mind was not mistaken. It simply did what it always does, offer its best guess before the senses finish their work. Then there are deeper, illusions that touch the body itself. Imagine sitting with your hand resting on a table, while someone gently strokes a rubber hand placed next to it. If the motions match perfectly, your hand hidden from view, the rubber hand clearly visible, you may begin to feel that the rubber hand is your own. It's a quiet, eerie sensation, like a whisper of confusion inside your body. This simple trick, known to researchers for decades, reveals how the mind builds a sense of the body from signals, expectations, and associations. Your feeling of "this is my hand" doesn't come from the hand itself, but from how the mind integrates information. This ability to create bodily reality can go even further. Some people who have lost a limb still feel as though it is there, not in an abstract sense, but vividly. The sensation of fingers curling, an itch on a missing ankle, the feeling of movement. These experiences, while sometimes uncomfortable, show just how strongly the mind holds onto its internal map of the body. Even when the physical limb is gone, the mental version remains, a ghostly echo of what once was, or perhaps what the brain expects still to be. If the mind can be convinced that a rubber hand is part of the body, or that a missing limb is still present, it becomes easier to understand how dreams, hallucinations, or déjà vu can arise. All these experiences come from the same fundamental ability of the mind, the ability to build a world from within. Consider déjà vu, that fleeting moment when the present feels like a memory. You step into a cafe you've never visited, yet something inside whispers, "I've been here before." The mind plays tricks not out of deception, but out of an attempt to match what you're experiencing with its vast library of past impressions. When patterns align in just the right way, lighting, sounds, smells, the brain may momentarily label the moment as familiar even when it isn't. Déjà vu is like a glitch in the stitching of time, a seam where the fabric of experience folds for one soft moment. The opposite feeling, jamais vu, is equally curious. It's when something familiar suddenly feels foreign. Reading a common word that suddenly looks strange, as if you've never seen it before. Walking through a place you know well, yet feeling as though the memory of it has slipped away. These moments arise not from fear, but from the delicate balance between recognition and novelty. The brain sometimes chooses not to connect the present with the past, even when it easily could. And then there are hallucinations, experiences that arise without any external trigger at all. They can occur when someone is very tired, very stressed, or just waking from sleep. A faint voice calling your name when no one is there. A shape near the edge of the bed that vanishes when you blink. These moments can be unsettling, but they also reveal something profound. The machinery your mind uses to perceive the world is the same machinery it uses to imagine it. When the signals come from the inside rather than the outside, the experience can still feel entirely real because the pathways are identical. This is why dreams feel so convincing, not because they reflect reality, but because they are built from the same ingredients, sensations, emotions, memories, predictions, assembled by the same brilliant storyteller inside your head. In a dream, you walk, speak, feel, and fear with no external world at all. The landscapes you wander, the faces you meet, the sounds you hear, they're all crafted from memory and imagination, woven into a temporary world that dissolves with dawn. If the mind can create entire worlds at night, worlds that feel real until they vanish, why should we assume that the waking world, which is also shaped and interpreted by the mind, is fundamentally different? The difference may not be in the nature of the experience, but in its stability. Dreams shift quickly, while waking perception holds steady, but both rely on the same internal tools. This doesn't mean waking life is a dream. Rather, it suggests that our experience of reality is more like a collaboration between the world outside and the world within. The mind does not simply open its doors and let reality walk in. It meets reality halfway, filling in details, smoothing over gaps, interpreting signals, and weaving them into something coherent enough to live in. And so, the illusions we encounter, whether they trick our eyes, our sense of the body, our memory, or our emotions, are not flaws. They are clues. They show us that reality, as we perceive it, is built from both the outer world and our inner expectations. They reveal that the line between what is real and what is constructed is not rigid but softly blurred. In this way, illusions become gentle teachers, reminding us to approach reality not as something fixed, but as something shaped by our minds, beautifully, continuously, and often without our awareness. There is a quiet tenderness in the way memory works, something almost fragile, like an old photograph that grows softer each time you hold it. We often imagine memories as tiny recordings tucked away somewhere inside the mind, waiting patiently for us to replay them whenever we choose. But memory is not a library of preserved moments. It is more like a story you rewrite each time you tell it, gently edited by emotion, perspective, and time. And because memory is flexible, our sense of who we are becomes flexible too. Imagine remembering a childhood afternoon, a warm day perhaps with sunlight resting on the sidewalks and the distant laughter of children playing. You can picture it. You can feel the texture of it. But if you think carefully, you might realize that what you remember is not the event itself, but a version shaped by years of reflection. Details may have shifted without your noticing. The colors may be brighter now, or the emotions deeper, or the people arranged slightly differently from how they truly were. Each time you recall the moment, your mind paints it again, softening some edges and sharpening others. Memory is not a museum of facts. It is a living, breathing process, an artist that revises its work each time you return to it. This constant rewriting is why two people who shared the same event can remember it differently. One might recall it as joyful, the other as worrying, even though their eyes saw the same scene. Their emotions, expectations, and interpretations shape the memory into something unique. In a gentle way, this means that each person lives inside a slightly different reality, crafted partly from the world outside and partly from the world within. And because memory shapes identity, your sense of self becomes a kind of evolving collage. Not a fixed portrait, but a mosaic made of stories you tell about yourself. One piece drawn from something you learned as a child, another from a moment of courage, another from a time you felt uncertain. Some pieces grow brighter with age, while others fade into the background. Who you are is not a single, unchanging being, but an ever-forming pattern of memories, reflections, and small internal shifts. Think about how differently you might answer a simple question. Who are you at different times in your life? As a child, you might have said, I like to run and climb trees. As a teenager, perhaps you said, I'm trying to figure out who I want to be. As an adult, you might answer with your work, your relationships, or your dreams. Each version is true in its own moment. Each version feels solid and real, and yet each one changes with time. This fluidity becomes even clearer when you think about moments when memory falters. You might forget where you placed your keys, or the name of someone you haven't seen in years. You might misremember the date of an old event or blend two different memories into one. These small slips are not errors. They're reminders that memory is a creative act, not a perfect archive. Even the feeling of nostalgia, warm, tender, slightly bittersweet, comes from memory's ability to weave emotion into the past, enriching certain moments and softening others. Dreams also play an important role in shaping memory. During the night, as the body rests, the mind moves through landscapes of imagination and motion. These dreams can be vivid or vague, comforting or strange. But while they unfold, they interact with memory in subtle ways. A dream might revisit a worry you had during the day, smoothing it into something manageable. Or it might take a recent experience and reorganize it, strengthening certain parts, loosening others. In this way, dreaming is not merely a side activity of sleep. It is part of how the mind updates itself, and the exchange goes both ways. Memory influences dreams, offering the raw material for the mind to rearrange, while dreams influence memory by shaping how experiences settle into place. A powerful dream can linger for hours or days, colouring your mood, changing your perspective, becoming part of your inner landscape even though it never truly happened. This shows just how entwined dreaming and waking life can be. Even though one occurs in darkness and the other in daylight, both contribute to the story you tell yourself about your life. Sometimes the mind even creates memories that never happened, not intentionally, not as lies, but as a kind of internal stitching, filling in gaps with what feels reasonable or familiar. If you've ever remembered a conversation a little differently than someone else, or been convinced you put an object somewhere only to find it in another place, you've experienced this gentle creativity of the mind. The brain does not like gaps, it fills them, often without telling you. And because the filling feels natural, you accept it as truth. This raises a quiet, intriguing question. If memory is fluid, changing, and partly imagined, how stable is our sense of reality? The world feels consistent because our memories of it feel consistent. But if those memories shift with time, if they blend, fade, or grow, we might be anchored less by what truly happened, and more by the stories our minds construct around it. This thought is not meant to unsettle. In fact, it can be comforting, because it means identity is not a rigid shape we must hold on to. It is something gentle, adaptive, capable of growing and healing. If the past can change in the way we remember it, then the future can change in the way we imagine it. Our inner world is more flexible than we often realize, and beneath all of this, the illusions, the memories, the shifting sense of self, lies the simple, beautiful truth that the mind is always trying to help us. It organises our experiences into a shape we can understand. It rewrites memories not to deceive us, but to integrate them. It allows identity to evolve so we can continue moving through life with a sense of coherence. Perhaps in this soft, shifting architecture of memory and self, we glimpse something of the deeper mystery we've been exploring. If who we are is a story we are constantly in the process of telling, then reality, the world we live in, the life we lead, may also be a story we shape through perception, memory and imagination. Not a dream exactly, but not completely fixed either. Something in between. Something alive. There's something quietly magical about watching the world reveal itself. Think about the way morning light enters a room, soft at first, then slowly brightening the shapes that were hidden in the dark, or the way a book lying closed on a table keeps its story tucked inside until you decide to open it. In moments like these, you can feel the world waiting for you to notice it, as if your attention has the gentle power to bring things into focus in the realm of the very small, smaller than dust, smaller even than the tiny specks floating in a sunbeam. There is a kind of waiting that becomes even more mysterious. These small building blocks of reality behave in ways that seem to depend on whether anyone is watching. It's as though the universe carries a subtle awareness of your gaze, responding when attention arrives, settling into form when you observe it, and drifting into uncertainty when you don't. Scientists sometimes call this idea the observer effect, but instead of thinking of it as a technical principle, it may help to imagine it like this. Tiny particles seem to hover between possibilities, like travellers standing at a crossroads. They can choose one path or another, but until someone looks, they haven't decided which. They move like whispers, quiet, tentative, almost unsure, and only when observed do they settle, as if the simple act of paying attention nudges them gently into choosing who they want to be in that moment. This is very different from how larger things behave. A tree doesn't change its shape when you look at it. A book doesn't alter its words when you open the cover. But in the world of the small, observation and outcome seem intertwined in a way that feels almost dreamlike. It challenges our common sense and invites us to imagine that reality might have layers we don't fully understand. To capture this feeling, imagine holding a book that behaves differently each time you look at it. The story inside shifts, offering different chapters depending on how you open it or from what angle you hold it. When the book is closed, the story is not one fixed tale, but many possibilities folded quietly into the pages. It is your interaction with it, your reading, that brings one version into being. That is, in a gentle way, similar to what happens in the smallest corners of nature. Of course, the world doesn't literally rewrite itself like a magical book. The point is that the behaviour of the smallest particles doesn't fully show itself until there is interaction, until there is relationship, touch, or attention. The universe appears to respond not with emotion or intent, but through a kind of subtle sensitivity built into the very fabric of existence. This doesn't mean reality is an illusion, or that everything dissolves the moment we look away. Instead, it suggests that reality may be more participatory than we usually imagine. We tend to think of the world as something that simply exists, independent of us. But these small particles behave more like partners in a dance, moving freely, then stepping into a clear pattern only when we join the dance with them. Light offers a beautiful example of this. It sometimes behaves like a wave, gentle and spreading, touching many places at once. Other times it acts like a small particle, focused and precise. Which way it behaves depends in part on how we observe it. It's as though light holds multiple possibilities, revealing one, or the other depending on the way the question is asked. Not in a conscious sense, but in a deeply natural one. Imagine a ripple moving across a pond. You see it spread wider and wider, touching everything in its path. That is the wave-like behaviour. Now imagine catching a raindrop landing in your hand. Small, sharp, definite. That is the particle-like behaviour. Light contains both possibilities, and which one appears depends on what we look for. It's like asking the universe a question and receiving different answers, not because the universe is tricking us, but because the question reshapes the response. This interplay between observation and outcome has led many people to think about reality differently, not as a fixed structure, but as something that interacts with us, something that responds to inquiry, to curiosity, to presence. This doesn't mean we create reality with our thoughts, not in the literal or dramatic way some might imagine, but it does suggest that the world is not entirely separate from the act of observing it. There is relationship, however subtle, and this relationship creates a gentle wonder. If the smallest building blocks of existence behave like possibilities waiting to be chosen, what does that say about reality at the larger scale? We often think of reality as solid, rigid, unquestionable. But beneath the surface, the foundation seems soft, flexible, shimmering with potential. Not unreal, but more open than we ever expected. Perhaps the most comforting way to think about this is to imagine reality as a great story told in layers. The larger layers, the ones we live in every day, are steady and reliable. Gravity pulls downward, time moves forward, the sun rises and sets. But underneath these familiar layers lie softer ones, full of uncertainty and possibility. Layers where things don't behave as objects do, but as chances, choices, tendencies. And these layers are what give rise to the world we know. The observer effect doesn't say that we dream reality into existence. It simply shows that reality has a delicate sensitivity, a responsiveness woven into its structure. It reminds us that the world is not entirely closed or predetermined. There is room for unpredictability, for wonder, for questions that don't have final answers. The smallest particles carry this mystery like a quiet glimmer, hidden in the heart of all things. And when you think about the universe in this way, even the act of noticing something becomes special. A leaf blowing across a sidewalk, a star flickering in the night sky, a reflection catching your eye. Each moment of attention becomes a small connection, a gentle meeting point between your awareness and the fabric of the world. In this sense, observing is not just seeing, it is participating. A soft acknowledgement that you are here and the world is here with you. If you've ever stood in front of a window at dusk, you might have noticed a curious thing. When the light inside the room grows brighter than the light outside, the glass turns into both a mirror and a window at the same time. You see your reflection floating gently over the landscape beyond it. Two worlds, one close, one distant, overlaid in a single surface. It feels strangely magical, as though reality can hold more than one layer at once. This quiet blending of surfaces offers a small glimpse into one of the most intriguing questions in modern physics. What if the universe itself works a little like a projection? Not a projection in the sense of something fake or artificial, but more like an image containing depth and richness even when the information behind it is stored somewhere else. It's an idea sometimes described in scientific circles using the word holographic, but we won't think of it in technical terms tonight. Instead, we will explore it gently, through imagery and sensation, the way one might explore a dream. Imagine holding a very thin sheet of paper, delicate as a dragonfly's wing. On its surface are tiny patterns, not pictures, not lines, but subtle arrangements that almost look like shimmering grains of dust. At first, the sheet doesn't seem to contain anything remarkable. But when you shine a soft light across it at just the right angle, a three-dimensional image appears, a shape rising from the surface, full of depth and detail that wasn't visible before. The image feels real, though you know it comes from a flat surface. It's not a trick. It's simply another way of storing information. Now imagine something far more astonishing. Imagine the three-dimensional world we live in, filled with stars, mountains, oceans, cities, rivers, and all the quiet places in between, emerging in a similar way. It isn't that the universe is two-dimensional, or that reality is literally a thin sheet. Rather, it's the idea that the richness we experience in 3 dimensions might be the unfolding of information woven into the universe in a deeper, more subtle layer, as though space itself is not a static container, but a kind of evolving pattern, expanding and revealing itself moment by moment. This idea is not meant to diminish the physical world. The mountains you climb are real. The air you breathe is real. The soft weight of your blanket or the warmth of sunlight on your skin, none of that changes. What changes is our understanding of where the structure of reality comes from. Instead of imagining the universe as a solid stage upon which everything is placed, this view imagines the stage itself as something emerging, like a picture slowly developing in a dark room. It helps to think of space not as a rigid grid, but as a flexible fabric. When you drop a pebble into a calm lake, ripples spread across the surface. The lake isn't solid, yet it can carry waves, shapes, movements. In a similar way, space might carry the ripples of events, particles, and forces, patterns unfolding from deeper rules we cannot yet see directly. It's like hearing the melody of a song without knowing the sheet music behind it. Gravity too becomes softer in this view. Instead of thinking of gravity as a physical pull, imagine it as the curvature or bending of this invisible fabric. Heavy objects, stars, planets, galaxies, press gently into the fabric, creating valleys. Lighter objects follow these curves, sliding along the shapes created by the heavier ones. It is a slow, graceful ballet of motion, shaped not by invisible strings, but by the geometry of space itself. And if space is something that emerges from deeper patterns, then gravity may be a story told by those patterns, a natural choreography rather than a separate force. This is where the holographic picture begins to feel more poetic. It suggests that what we experience as here and out there might be linked in ways that are not immediately obvious. The information that shapes the motion of stars millions of light years away may be encoded in the quiet structure of the universe around us, woven into the fabric that connects everything. You don't need to imagine this as distant or abstract. Think instead of how your own mind stores memories. A single memory might be contained in many different parts of the brain. You might recall a smell, a sound, a colour, and an emotion, all woven together invisibly. The memory feels whole, even though it comes from scattered pieces. Similarly, the universe might be whole because its information is woven throughout, not confined to one particular place. And just as your memories reveal more details when you pay attention, subtle textures, forgotten sensations, the universe might reveal more structure when we look carefully. The patterns we see in galaxies, the way space curves, the faint background glow left over from the early universe. All these could be clues pointing toward a deeper layer we haven't yet fully uncovered. Not hidden behind curtains or locked away, but simply expressed differently, waiting for us to learn the right way to read them. It's important to remember, though, that this idea is still a possibility, a gentle theory, not a proven truth. It's not something science presents as fact, but something that arises from hints and patterns. And that's what makes it so beautifully fitting for a quiet exploration like this. It invites curiosity without demanding certainty. It allows us to consider that reality may be richer, more layered, more poetic than we typically imagine. If space is indeed something that unfolds from deeper rules, then the universe becomes not just a place we inhabit, but a story we are living through. One written in patterns instead of words, expressed through movement, shape, and light. A story that holds us, surrounds us, and quietly asks us to pay attention. And whether the universe is a hologram in a scientific sense, or simply a metaphor for how reality feels, it offers a comforting thought that the world we see is only one expression of something far greater, something woven through every star, every breath, every moment of existence. There are moments in life, quiet, fleeting moments, when you might feel slightly detached from yourself, almost as though you're watching your life from just a step behind your own eyes. It can happen when you're exhausted, or deeply absorbed in thought, or standing somewhere unfamiliar. You sense the world moving around you, and yet your presence in it feels strangely light, as if you are both here and not fully here at the same time. These moments are small reminders that the self, the I you identify with, is not as fixed as it seems. It is something softer, more fluid, more constructed than we often realize. In many ways, the sense of self is like the soft glow of a lantern. It feels steady, but that steady glow comes from constant movement inside. Fuel burning, light flickering, shadow shifting. Likewise, the mind is continuously building and rebuilding the sense of self, moment by moment, from a mixture of memories, sensations, feelings, and expectations. And this gentle reconstruction happens so seamlessly that we rarely notice it. You can see evidence of this in illusions involving the body. Imagine sitting at a table, your real hand hidden from your view. In front of you lies a life-size rubber hand. Someone slowly strokes both your hidden hand and the rubber hand at the same time. At first, it feels like a simple trick, but after a minute or two, you may begin to sense the touch on the rubber hand as though it were your own. You know logically that the rubber hand is not you, yet the mind starts expanding its map of the body to include it. Your sense of ownership shifts, not because you decide it should, but because the brain is trying to maintain a coherent picture of what belongs to you. This simple experience reveals something remarkable. Your sense of self is built from perception, not from absolute truth. Your mind claims what it believes belongs to you, based on timing, touch, sight, expectation, all woven together. The rubber hand feels like yours only because the signals reaching your brain agree just enough to satisfy the story it's trying to tell. There are even more striking examples. People who lose a limb often continue to feel sensations where the limb once was. A missing hand may still itch. A missing foot might feel warm. The mind maintains a body map, continuing to update it based on memory and expectation, long after the outer reality has changed. This phantom feeling is not an error or a malfunction. It's the mind doing what it does best, constructing a sense of self from the inside out. Even your memories shape who you think you are, yet memory itself is fluid. It shifts with retelling, with mood, with age. If identity were a solid structure, like a stone monument, then memory would need to be unchanging. But memory moves, gently, like water. Your understanding of who you are shifts with it. Experiences that once felt defining may fade. Small moments you thought insignificant may grow brighter in hindsight. The story of you is continually rewritten. And this brings us to a soft but profound idea. If the sense of self is something the brain constructs, then the you who experiences the world is not a fixed observer, but a kind of ongoing creation. A character your mind animates from the inside. Not imaginary, not at all, but not carved in stone either. More like a character in a story that updates itself every day. This idea also appears in modern neuroscience, where some researchers describe the self as a model, a useful interface that helps the mind navigate the world. It's not a thing you possess, but a process you experience. The mind builds the self the same way it builds perception, by integrating signals, memories, emotions, and expectations. This doesn't make the self any less meaningful. If anything, it makes it more beautiful, because it means we're not trapped in a rigid identity. We're capable of growth, healing, and change. Even in moments when the sense of self becomes unsteady, during deep meditation, grief, illness, or exhaustion, the world doesn't disappear. Instead, it becomes clear that the self is part of reality's story rather than its foundation. Like a reflection on water, it is vivid, but it also moves with the slightest ripple. This flexibility of the self becomes even more interesting when we connect it back to the physical world. The world where particles sometimes behave differently when observed, where space might unfold from deeper patterns. If the building blocks of reality are not entirely fixed, if they hold potential, flexibility, uncertainty, then it's not surprising that the self built on top of them would hold those qualities too. A soft universe gives rise to a soft self, and in this way the boundary between inner and outer reality begins to blur. If the world around you is shaped partly by perception, and your self is shaped by perception as well, then both are taking form through similar processes. Both are stories told by the mind, grounded in something real but shaped through experience. They're reflections of one another, one outside, one inside. This doesn't mean the self is an illusion in the sense of being fake. Rather, it means the self is something dynamic, alive, continuously shaped. Like a candle flame that maintains its form even as the wax melts and the air moves around it. The flame is real, even if it is always changing. There is a soft comfort in viewing the self this way. It means that moments of confusion or instability are not failures. They're part of the natural movement of a mind that is always adapting. It means that who you were 5 years ago does not limit who you can become 5 years from now. The self is not a cage, it's a canvas. And perhaps the most gentle thought of all is this: if the self is constructed moment by moment, then each moment holds the possibility of becoming someone new. Not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet shifts of perspective, the subtle growth of understanding, the soft expansion of compassion. The self is a story you participate in creating, not alone, but in partnership with the world around you and the world within you. And so we arrive at a question that isn't meant to unsettle, but to invite curiosity. If the self you experience is built from perception, memory, and imagination, then what does that say about the world in which this self exists? If the you, who looks at reality as partly constructed, is the reality you look at constructed in a similar way, not false, but interpreted, not fixed, but shaped, and perhaps, just like the self, more flexible than it appears. There's a certain kind of quiet wonder that settles in when you watch an artist paint, or a writer build a world from nothing but imagination. A blank canvas slowly fills with colours. A sheet of paper gathers characters, landscapes, and emotions until it becomes a place someone else can step into. It's a reminder that worlds don't always begin with matter. Sometimes they begin with intention, with patterns, with a story taking shape. This gentle idea becomes even more intriguing when we turn our attention back to reality itself. The world you move through each day feels solid and physical. Buildings stand, rivers flow, stars drift across the night sky. Everything seems grounded in something steady. But every so often, late at night, or in moments of deep curiosity, a question surfaces like a soft ripple. What if the universe is not only discovered, but in some way created? What if reality itself might be a kind of rendering? Modern thinkers sometimes call this possibility the simulation hypothesis, but that phrase can sound colder and more mechanical than the idea truly is. Rather than imagining giant machines or blinking control panels, it may be easier to approach this thought the way we've approached everything tonight, with softness, imagery, and curiosity. So imagine this instead. Far in the future, a civilization has grown so advanced that it can recreate entire worlds from memory. They can build environments where sunlight feels warm, where winds move gently through trees, where people live full and complex lives, just as real to themselves as we are to ourselves. Not copies, but living histories, carefully replayed for learning, reflection, or wonder. These creations would be like immersive memories, vivid, detailed, unfolding in time. In this view, a simulation is not a cold technical project, but a story being lived from the inside. A long breathing tale where each person becomes a character shaping their own path. And if such a thing were possible, the idea emerges gently. How would the characters within that world know whether they were living in the original universe or one crafted in its image? This is the core of the simulation hypothesis. Not that our world is fake, but that it could be one layer of a larger pattern. One chapter within a longer book. And this chapter would still feel entirely real to those inside it, just as dreams feel real while we're dreaming, or stories feel real when we're lost in them. To bring this idea closer, imagine the virtual worlds we create today. In a video game or a beautifully animated film, landscapes emerge from lines of instruction, yet they can feel surprisingly alive. The horizon glows, water ripples, leaves move when wind passes through the trees. Characters walk, speak, and make choices. Even though we know these scenes are generated, our minds still respond emotionally. A story unfolding even inside a digital world still reaches us. But these creations, advanced as they may seem, are only tiny seeds compared to the kind of richness a far future civilization might achieve. If we can build small digital worlds now, then a civilization thousands or millions of years more advanced might build something far more intricate, something indistinguishable from what we call reality. Of course, all this remains a question, not an answer. There is no proof, no single clue that says, yes, the universe is a simulation. But there are patterns that spark the imagination. The elegant structure of physical laws, the mathematical symmetry woven into forces and particles, the way the universe seems to obey rules with remarkable precision. Not symbols, not equations, just the simple observation that everything follows patterns, like code written into the fabric of nature. And yet, even if the universe were generated from a deeper layer, it wouldn't make our experience any less real. A world experienced through joy, sorrow, connection, curiosity, and love is a real world no matter how it began. We do not judge the authenticity of a story by the ink it's printed with, but by how deeply it touches the heart. If anything, this possibility invites us to see the world with more wonder. If reality is crafted by nature, by mathematics, by something beyond our current understanding, then every sunrise becomes a kind of artwork. Every emotion becomes a brushstroke. Every interaction becomes a moment where the universe expresses itself through you. Consider how a map works. The lines on paper represent mountains, rivers, and roads, but they are not the landscape itself. They are a simplified way of holding the complexity of the world. A simulation, if it exists, would be like the opposite. A vast landscape arising from deeper, more subtle information, like a painting that grows richer the closer you look. And we, the ones moving within it, will be both participants and observers, shaping the story as we live it. There's a gentle elegance in this view. It suggests that meaning does not depend on the origin of the world, but on the experience within it. Whether we live in a physical universe, a projected one, or something in between, our feelings, choices, and connections remain genuine. A simulated sunset still warms the eyes. A simulated kindness still softens the heart. As with many ideas tonight, the simulation hypothesis doesn't aim to tell us what reality is, but what it might be. It invites us to loosen our grip on certainty, to explore the possibility that the world has layers we cannot yet see. And good questions always bring us closer to understanding, even if they don't offer final answers. So we continue our journey not with conclusions, but with quiet curiosity, wondering how many ways there might be to understand the place we call home. There's a particular kind of curiosity that comes alive when something small doesn't fit the pattern of our expectations. A clock that ticks slightly off rhythm, a light that flickers for no clear reason, a familiar word that suddenly looks unusual when you stare at it too long. These tiny moments don't disturb us, but they catch our attention. They remind us that the world isn't always as tightly woven as it seems. Sometimes the seams show, just for a heartbeat. In conversations about whether reality might be a kind of rendering or unfolding story, people often bring up the idea of glitches. Not in the dramatic sense of the word, not like scenes suddenly freezing or laws of physics breaking in obvious ways, but rather small oddities that make us pause and wonder. Moments when reality seems slightly out of step with itself. And while most of these moments have simple explanations, errors in memory, tricks of perception, coincidences, they still hold a certain poetry. They reveal how much of our understanding of the world depends on expectation, and how the unexpected invites us to look closer. Consider something as simple as the Mandela effect, where groups of people remember a detail differently from how it appears today. A book title spelled one way in memory, but another way on the shelf. A childhood character who looks slightly different than you recall. A movie line everyone seems to quote in a version that never appears in the script. These mismatches can be explained through how memory rewrites itself, merging similar experiences into a single story. Yet the phenomenon still feels mysterious when you encounter it, like discovering a page you thought you'd read before has been edited. Then there are coincidences, those moments when life aligns in a way that feels almost orchestrated. You think about someone you haven't spoken to in years, and they call you that afternoon. You dream about a place you've never visited, then see it on the front page of the morning paper. Rationally, we know coincidences happen naturally when the world contains so many overlapping events. But emotionally, they feel different. They feel personal, like messages written into the fabric of your day. They tug gently at the boundary between randomness and meaning. Nature, too, is full of repeating structures that stir this same sense of wonder. The spirals of a seashell, the branching of trees mirrored in the branching of lightning and rivers, patterns that recur not because of design, but because nature follows simple rules that echo across scales. These patterns make the world feel intimate, as though everything is connected by an invisible rhythm. And while science explains these shapes through growth processes and physical constraints, the emotional experience of seeing them, especially in quiet moments, can feel like glimpsing something deeper. But if you look closer at all these glitches, a softer truth emerges. Most of them are rooted not in the structure of the universe, but in the structure of the mind. When your mind sees a pattern that isn't really there, it's not making a mistake. It's doing what it has done for thousands of years, searching for shape, meaning, and continuity. Humans survived by recognizing patterns, changes in weather, the movement of animals, signs of danger or opportunity. Our tendency to see connections is a strength, even when it leads us to create connections that aren't actually present. This doesn't make the patterns less beautiful. It simply reveals how creativity and perception intertwine. Similarly, when we remember something incorrectly, it's not because our memory is broken. It's because memory is living, fluid, constantly reconstructing itself. When many people misremember the same detail, it's often because we share similar cultural images, stories, or assumptions. The mind fills gaps based on what it expects, not always what happened. It's a gentle reminder that our inner world shapes our outer experience in quiet, unnoticed ways. The feeling of a glitch is really a moment when these inner processes briefly step into view. When the mind's predictions and reality's details don't align perfectly, the discrepancy becomes noticeable. It's like hearing a pianist hit one slightly off-key note in an otherwise smooth melody. Not disruptive, just enough to make you listen more closely. And yet, even knowing the psychological explanations, there is value in allowing ourselves to feel that small spark of mystery. Because the search for meaning in these moments is not misguided, it is deeply human. It reflects the same curiosity that drives us to explore the stars, to study atoms, to ask why we dream, and to wonder what consciousness truly is. Mystery is not an enemy of understanding, it is a companion to it. In discussions about reality possibly being constructed, Some people imagine these glitches as hints, small tears in the fabric, clues that the world might be layered or rendered or shaped from somewhere deeper. But even if the universe is entirely physical and not simulated at all, these moments still serve a purpose. They remind us that our perception is not perfect, and that the world holds more nuance than we can capture in a single glance. The most gentle way to think about glitches is this: they are invitations to slow down, to question softly, to notice the details you might otherwise overlook. They encourage us to observe the world not as something static, but as something alive, unfolding, surprising. They remind us that the line between certainty and curiosity is porous, and that stepping into curiosity is not something to fear. Because even if every glitch has a natural explanation, the experience of wondering about them can open doors in the mind. Doors to imagination. Doors to possibility. Doors to new ways of understanding ourselves and the world. And sometimes the value of a mystery is not in solving it, but in letting it expand our sense of wonder. So, as we continue drifting through these ideas tonight, think of glitches not as cracks in reality, but as small windows, moments when the world invites you to look again, gently, with fresh eyes. There is a moment each night when the world you know dissolves without warning. You close your eyes and the familiar room fades into darkness. The air grows still, the rhythm of your breath deepens and your thoughts begin to wander, loosened from the rules that guide them during the day. And then, quietly, another world rises to meet you. Sometimes it's soft and warm, like drifting through memories. Sometimes it's strange, full of impossible scenes and shifting landscapes. And sometimes it feels so real that waking becomes the surprise. Dreams have a way of holding you gently and completely, even though the world inside them is made of nothing you can touch. Yet the mind treats dreams with earnest seriousness. You run from something in a dream and your heart races. You fall and your body tenses. You smile, cry, speak, and listen. The dream feels alive. The world feels coherent, and you respond as though everything within it exists in the same way the waking world exists. That alone tells us something profound. Your mind can generate reality-sized experiences entirely on its own. Consider how complex a dream can be. A city you've never visited, a face you don't recognize yet instinctively trust, a story that seems to unfold with its own logic, emotions that swell or quiet with no physical cause. All of this appears spontaneously, crafted by the same system that shapes your waking experience. The difference is not in the machinery, but in the source of the information. When awake, your mind uses sensory signals. When dreaming, it reshapes memories, feelings, fragments of thought, and imitates the structure of waking life. Even the way the dream world behaves reflects this. Many dreams obey rules that feel familiar: gravity, movement, distance, light, sound. Rooms have walls, doors open, voices resonate. You interact with dream environments the same way you interact with physical ones, even though none of it exists outside your mind. In other dreams, the rules become fluid or whimsical. You fly, time jumps, places blend together. These shifts reveal that your mind is not bound to physical laws. It simply imitates them because that is the grammar of experience it knows best. This makes dreaming a remarkable mirror for understanding consciousness. If the mind can create a world without sensory input, and you can inhabit that world fully, then waking life becomes even more fascinating. Because in the waking state, your mind does something similar. It constructs a coherent world using available information. The difference is that waking information comes from your eyes, ears, skin, and the steady stream of signals from the environment. But the act of construction, the creation of a seamless, believable reality, is the same. Inside the brain, the regions responsible for imagination, imagery, memory, and emotion remain active during dreams. Meanwhile, the systems that evaluate, analyze, and question are quieter. This is why a dream can feel utterly convincing, even when the events make no sense. Your inner critic sleeps so the story can flow. You accept what happens without resistance because the part of you that asks questions is resting. This blending of realism and imagination allows dreams to perform a quiet but powerful role in your emotional life. During the night, your mind replays certain experiences, sometimes in symbolic form, to soften emotional edges, rehearse potential outcomes, or reflect on things you didn't have time to process while awake. A stressful day might produce a restless dream. A meaningful connection might appear as a comforting scene. Even fears can show up, not to frighten you, but to help you approach them in a space where consequences are softened. Dreams also shape memory. Research suggests that while sleeping, the mind organizes experiences, strengthens certain connections, and lets others fade. It's like cleaning a room, sifting through piles of thoughts, deciding what to keep and what to let go of. When you wake, you often feel different from the person who lay down hours before. Not dramatically, but subtly, as though the mind smoothed something out during the night. There's a poetic symmetry to this. Waking life influences dreams, and dreams influence waking life. The two realms are not separate. They form a continuous loop, each feeding the other, shaping the texture of your inner world. If you think of your mind as a storyteller, waking life provides the characters and scenery, while dreams explore the deeper themes, your fears, hopes, ideas, and unresolved feelings. And this connection between dreaming and waking brings us to a gentle question. If the mind can build worlds that feel real at night, what does it build during the day? It doesn't fabricate waking reality, but it does shape your experience of it. It filters, interprets, emphasizes, and fills in. Your waking world is not a raw feed of information. It is a carefully constructed scene, much like a dream, just anchored more firmly to the external world. This doesn't make waking life any less meaningful. In fact, it highlights how creative and active the mind is. Instead of being a passive observer, you participate in forming your reality. You give meaning to events. You choose what to focus on. You construct narratives about yourself and your relationships. You interpret experiences through your past, your expectations, your emotions. Dreams simply reveal how powerful this creative ability is. They take away the external world for a while, and the mind continues anyway, producing landscapes, stories, and sensations from within. They are reminders that the world you experience, both awake and asleep, is always filtered through consciousness. Even lucid dreams, the dreams in which you become aware you are dreaming, show this relationship beautifully. In these dreams, you may change the environment, control the narrative, or fly through spaces that feel vivid and real. You feel the freedom of shaping your world instantly. And while waking life has rules that dreams do not, the sense of agency remains. You shape your waking experience too, through choices, through perception, through the meaning you give to each moment. Perhaps this is why dreams have always fascinated humans. They show us a version of reality that is intimate, emotional, fluid, and deeply connected to who we are. They remind us that consciousness is not bound strictly to the external world. It creates worlds, dissolves them, revisits them, reimagines them, all without leaving the quiet space of the mind. And when morning comes and dreams dissolve like mist in sunlight, something remains, a feeling, a question, a whisper of meaning, a reminder that the boundary between dreaming and waking is not a hard line, but a gentle gradient, and in that gradient we learn something important. Consciousness does not merely witness reality, it shapes it. There are times, even in the brightness of day, when the world takes on a softness usually reserved for dreams. It might happen when you're waking up slowly, your mind still half asleep, drifting between two worlds, or when you're exhausted and the edges of things feel blurred, or during a moment when emotion, whether joy, grief, love, or fear, makes everything appear strangely intensified, almost unreal. These moments remind us that dreaming and waking are not completely separate realms. They touch, they overlap, and sometimes they flow into each other like colours dissolving in water. One of the gentlest of these moments occurs during hypnagogia, that drifting state right as you fall asleep. It's the threshold between awareness and dreaming, where thoughts loosen and begin to transform into images. You're not fully dreaming yet, but you're no longer anchored in the clarity of waking. Sounds may stretch into surreal echoes. A random image might float before your eyes. A word spoken in the room might blend strangely with a memory. Many people hear their names called in this state, or imagine footsteps, or see flashes of scenes that vanish as quickly as they appear. Nothing is fully real. Nothing is fully imagined. It's a soft twilight of consciousness. There is a similar state on the other side of sleep, hypnopompia, the moments when you first wake, especially after a deep night's dream. Your mind is present, but the story from the dream still clings to the edges of awareness. You might look around your room and feel as though it belongs to two worlds at once. The real one you know, and the dream you just left. The transition is not abrupt. It's more like rising slowly from underwater, feeling the shift from one density to another. And then there is sleep paralysis, a phenomenon often described with fear but which, when framed gently, reveals much about the blending of states. In sleep paralysis, the dreaming mind wakes before the body fully does. You become aware of your room, of the quiet around you, yet your body remains still, held by the natural paralysis your brain uses during dreaming to prevent you from acting out your dreams. For a moment, the dream and waking worlds overlap so completely that figures from dreaming may appear faintly in the room, or sounds from the dream may whisper through waking silence. It is an unsettling experience, but also a profound one. It shows how thin the boundary between worlds can be, how the mind transitions gradually, not instantly. Outside of sleep, reality can feel dreamlike during intense emotional experiences. Grief can make the world feel distant, as though you're watching yourself move through it from afar. Joy can make colours feel too bright, sounds too warm, time too fluid. Falling in love often brings a surreal shimmer to everything. The ordinary becomes extraordinary, the familiar becomes new. Emotional states shift perception, altering what we notice, how deeply we feel, and how connected we are to the moment. Travel creates this effect too. Arriving in a new place, especially after a long journey, can feel like stepping into a dream. Streets you've never walked seem strange and theatrical. The air feels different. Voices carry unfamiliar rhythms. Your mind hasn't built expectations yet, so the world feels fresh, slightly dislocated, like a dream in which everything is both real and unreal. Even jet lag adds to this sensation. Your internal clock lags behind the world outside, and for a while you exist in a space where night and day feel mismatched. Meditation can create a similar shift. Sitting quietly, breathing slowly, allowing thoughts to drift, the world can begin to feel like a soft projection. Peaceful, open, unbounded. Some people describe the sense that the self dissolves slightly, not disappearing, but loosening. Sounds become more vivid. Light becomes gentler. Time feels slower. In this reflective state, the world feels less like something you look at and more like something you're inside, immersed in, connected to, shaped by. Even small, everyday moments can feel dreamlike. Standing under a street lamp in the rain at night, watching snow fall through the glow of a window, hearing a familiar song from long ago, looking at an old photograph that makes years fold into a single instant. These experiences carry a quiet magic, a softening of edges that makes the world feel richer, deeper, more mysterious. Why do these moments feel dreamlike? Partly because our perception shifts. When emotion is strong, or routine is broken, or consciousness transitions between states, the mind stops relying on its usual predictive patterns. It becomes more open, more receptive, more fluid. You may notice details you normally overlook, or you may find your mind drifting inward, blending memory with sensation. Waking reality becomes less of a fixed structure and more of a flowing experience. There's something comforting about this. Dreamlike moments in waking life show us that consciousness is not rigid. It's a landscape with many layers. It moves through different textures, clarity, softness, vividness, fogginess, depending on where attention rests. The world feels solid not because it is unchanging, but because the mind usually holds it together tightly. When that grip relaxes, the world reveals its quieter, more poetic side. These dreamlike moments also remind us that perception is deeply personal. Two people can stand in the same street, hear the same sounds, see the same lights, yet experience different realities based on their inner states. One person might feel grounded and stable. The other might feel like they're floating, slightly detached, as though observing life from a gentle distance. Both experiences are valid. Both reveal how the mind shapes reality in subtle ways. In truth, these moments are not glitches or distortions. They are invitations, moments when the world encourages you to slow down, to notice the shimmer beneath the surface of ordinary life. They remind you that reality isn't just something to understand. It's something to feel, something you participate in. And perhaps in these dreamlike states, the mind is showing us something important, that the boundary between inner and outer worlds is not a wall, but a curtain, thin, movable, and sometimes, in the right light, almost transparent. There's a quiet balance that exists between certainty and mystery. Most of the time, we move through the world with confidence. We reach for objects, trust the ground beneath us, and believe our senses without question. But woven softly through this solidness is another experience. Those dreamlike moments when the world feels gentler, more fluid, more open to interpretation. And it's in the space between these two, between the firm and the floating, that the deepest reflections about reality often arise. Now that we've wandered through philosophy, neuroscience, physics, dreams, and perception, a gentle truth begins to reveal itself. Perhaps reality is not one thing or the other, not purely physical nor purely imagined, not a dream, yet not entirely independent of the mind that perceives it. Instead, maybe reality is a meeting point, a collaboration, where the world and consciousness shape each other in ways we're only beginning to understand. Consider how waking experience depends on perception. Everything you see, hear, touch, and remember is filtered through the mind. The world might be full of sensory information, but it is your brain that turns those signals into colours, textures, shapes, and meaning. Without consciousness, the world would still exist, but your experience of it, the richness and detail and emotion, arises from within. Reality is built from both inputs and interpretation. It is real, and yet it is dreamlike in the sense that the mind must actively shape it. At the same time, the physical universe feels undeniably substantial. The objects around you are not imagined. They don't dissolve when you look away. The world holds its form, follows consistent patterns, and behaves independently of your personal wishes. You don't float into the air simply because you dream of flying. You don't walk through walls just because you're curious. The stability of waking life distinguishes it from dreams, its continuity, its shared nature, its reliable structure. And yet the world is not as rigid as it seems. At the smallest scales, we've seen that particles behave like possibilities waiting for a nudge. Space may be something that unfolds from deeper patterns. Time flows in a direction shaped by change rather than an absolute rule carved into the universe. Even the laws of nature, as steady as they are, appear to arise from elegant symmetries. Structured, yes, but also strangely delicate. Then there is the self, the you who experiences the world. The self feels continuous, but it too is a process, shaped by memories that shift, by emotions that rise and fall, by states of awareness that change from moment to moment. You are real, yet not fixed. You are solid, yet fluid, much like reality itself. When viewed this way, the boundary between dream and waking experience becomes softer. A dream can feel real. Reality can feel dreamlike. What separates them is not the presence of meaning, but the stability of the environment and the degree of control you have. Dreams are worlds generated fully by the mind. Waking life is a world shaped by both the mind and the external environment. Both experiences are authentic. They just come from different blends of inner and outer forces. There is something beautiful, even comforting, about seeing reality as both grounded and mysterious. You don't have to choose between believing everything is solid and believing everything is illusion. The truth may lie somewhere in the gentle middle. The world provides the canvas, the mind provides the colours, and together they create a painting that feels intimate and alive. This perspective also allows uncertainty to become a source of wonder rather than worry. Not knowing exactly how consciousness arises, or why dreams feel so vivid, or why the universe follows such elegant rules, these questions open a door rather than closing one. They remind us that existence is not a puzzle to be solved once, but a story to be experienced slowly, a story that changes as you change. You might find comfort in the idea that reality does not need to be fully understood to be deeply meaningful. A sunrise is no less beautiful because you don't fully grasp the physics behind light scattering. A moment of kindness is no less powerful because you cannot define the biology of emotion. Meaning arises from experience, not explanation. An experience is shaped by the interplay between the outer world and the inner one. Think of a moment when you felt fully present, watching waves move towards shore, holding someone's hand, standing in a quiet room as light filtered in. That moment felt real in a way that goes beyond the physical senses. It felt complete, waking and dreamlike at the same time. You were grounded in your body, yet expanded in your awareness. You were living reality while also drifting in its softness. This is the dual nature of existence, sturdiness held by something tender, and this duality does not make the world less trustworthy. It makes it richer. It means life can hold mystery without losing meaning. It means your perceptions matter, your memories matter, your consciousness matters. You're not a passive observer of reality. You're a participant shaping it gently through attention, interpretation, and presence. Perhaps reality is both what is out there and what is in here, woven together so seamlessly that we rarely notice the stitching. Perhaps the mind does not just receive the world, but collaborates with it. Perhaps existence is a partnership between the physical and the experiential, between structure and story. Seen in this light, asking whether reality is real or dreamlike becomes less of a question and more of a doorway, an invitation to explore, to wonder, to feel, to notice the subtleties of consciousness, to appreciate the stability of the world and the softness of perception, to recognize that both are part of the same tapestry. And maybe, at the end of all our questioning, we find peace not in choosing one interpretation, but in embracing the quiet mystery that holds them both. There comes a point in every quiet exploration when the questions soften, the edges blur, and the ideas we've been carrying gently fold themselves into something simpler, something closer to feeling than to thought. After wandering through the landscapes of perception, memory, dreaming, physics, illusion, and meaning, we begin to realize that the mystery of reality is not something to solve, but something to inhabit. Like sitting beside a river at dusk, watching the light shimmer on its surface, knowing there is depth beneath the reflections but feeling no urgency to see the bottom. Tonight, we've explored the idea that reality might be a dream, or at least dreamlike in its construction. We've seen how the mind shapes experience, how the self is fluid, how perception is woven from expectation and sensation. We've drifted into ancient stories of shadows and reflections, walked quietly through the strange corners of quantum behaviour, noticed the soft seams of coincidence and illusion, and embraced the idea that consciousness is not separate from the world but intertwined with it. And now, as we return from that wide wandering, it becomes clear that the most important part of this journey is not the theories we encountered, but the gentle shift in the way we see. Not, is the universe real or not? But, how might I live if reality is both more mysterious and more intimate than I thought? There is a comforting thought hidden in all of this. If reality is partly shaped by the mind, if experience is a collaboration between what exists outside and what arises within, then you have always been part of the story, not a separate observer. Your presence colours the world just as the world colours your presence. The sights you notice, the meanings you choose, the memories you hold, and the hopes you carry all become threads in the tapestry of your reality. You don't need to understand every layer of existence to feel grounded. In fact, many of the most meaningful things in life don't require understanding at all. You don't need to know exactly what consciousness is to feel the comfort of another person's voice. You don't need to understand the structure of space-time to feel awe beneath a sky full of stars. You don't need to solve the mystery of dreaming to appreciate the way it renews you each night. Reality offers itself to you through experience, not through certainty. Perhaps this is why the idea of the unknown can feel strangely peaceful. When you release the need for final answers, you create space for wonder. You create room for quiet observation, for presence, for appreciating the moment as it arrives. The mind no longer reaches forward or backward. It settles softly like dust drifting to the floor in a warm beam of sunlight. And in this softness, life becomes more vivid, not less. You begin to notice the way light falls on a table, the way a familiar voice carries warmth, the quiet pattern of your breath. You become more aware of yourself, not as a fixed identity, but as a flowing presence, changing gently with each passing moment. The world feels less like a puzzle, and more like an unfolding story that you are living in real time. Even the unknown becomes something friendly. Instead of darkness, it becomes night sky, deep, quiet, filled with possibility. A place where answers may exist, but where the beauty comes from the openness itself. A place where curiosity becomes a companion, not a burden. And if reality is layered, part physical, part perceptual, part emotional, part mysterious, then your place in it is layered too. You're not just a thinker or a dreamer or an observer. You're the meeting point of all these things, shaped by the world while also giving shape to it. You're part of the unfolding, part of the shimmer, part of the dreamlike dance between inner and outer existence. As this session draws to a close, imagine sitting in a quiet room as the night settles in around you. The air is still, the world has slowed, and you're simply here, breathing, listening, feeling the gentle presence of your own awareness. Whether reality is a dream, a simulation, a projection, or something far more complex, one thing remains steady. This moment is yours. This breath, this sense of being. You don't need to reach for certainty. You don't need to hold on to questions. You can let everything rest, like leaves settling onto the forest floor. The universe will continue unfolding its great, intricate story, and you will continue walking through it, shaping it with your perception, your memories, your inner life. And perhaps, if there is one message woven through everything we've explored, it's this. Whether reality is built of particles or patterns, whether it is dreamed by consciousness or shaped by physics, whether it is one layer or many, It remains profoundly meaningful because you are here, experiencing it, feeling it, giving it colour, shape, and significance. Your existence is not accidental. It is part of the story. So as the night deepens and your thoughts drift softly toward rest, allow yourself to relax into the unknown. Let the questions become quiet companions rather than problems to solve. Let yourself be held gently by the mystery, because even if reality is a dream, or something like one, it is still your world, your life, your moment in the vast unfolding tapestry of being, and that is enough.